He is an 8-time Emmy Award winner. He is a beloved member of the soccer broadcasting community. He is the president of Bizzy Signals Entertainment. He does consulting. He is an executive, production executive with so much experience in live sports, anything related to sports media that we know. And we're going to have fun looking into his career, spotlight him, and generate some neat stories from what he's been able to accomplish and why he is an inspirational figure in the business. That is what we're going to talk about today. I'm Bryan Fenley, a national anchor at Fox Sports Radio, broadcaster for the USTA. And this is the On to Something podcast. And clearly, Michael, you're on to something, onto a few things with all the cool ventures you're a part of. And one of the things that a lot of people know you about is how well you are tapped into the broadcasting space of soccer. And people that love soccer have watched your work, and that's clear. And one of the things that also was clear is how outside the box and how ahead of your time you are when thinking about neat things to integrate into a broadcast. So where did this artistic genius come from you?
Well, very generous of you. Bryan, first of all, thank you very much for having me. I'm very much looking forward to kind of talking to you and getting to know you and talking about the world that I live in and the world that I love. So thank you very much. Again, very generous with the genius aspect of it. It's being in the right place at the right time. I was very fortunate to get into the business in the very early years of ESPN. 1984, actually right out of college, where creativity was not just encouraged, but was necessitated by the fact we were doing things with less budget. We weren't doing many high-profile sports at the time, so it was an opportunity, and I was given the opportunity. And basically, you were encouraged and coached and taught to really think outside the box to make up for the fact that you just didn't have the kind of resources that at the time the three major networks, not four, the three major networks had. So I would tell you I was blessed in that opportunity and encouraged with our executive team at ESPN at the time.
How early on, even before you got into the business, did you realize that you had some talents artistically? Growing up, things that you did and the way you looked at things, and that gave you sort of a foreshadowing that the way in which your career would unfold was just how it was supposed to be?
So again, it's like first of all, I love what I do. And I had parents that encouraged me to go for it. I did major in economics, ironically, but I did have high school and college internships inside the television sports world. And while most of my friends were thinking of going into traditional lines of work, doctors and lawyers and all that, my parents supported me in my love for sports television. And when given the opportunity to graduate college and get right into a position at ESPN. Again, I had the full support. I do remember my father telling me, because I did apply for other positions at the again back to the major networks, and when my father heard I was going to be accepting this job at this fledgling cable network up in the middle of Bristol, Connecticut. My father was a bit concerned. Like a lot of people in the early years of ESPN, is who would watch sports in the middle of the week and not just on weekends. And what is this 24-hour sports thing? So a little trepidatious, but my parents gave me great advice and said, go for it, and you got to do what you love. And I think that really helps in everything that I do, and also what I encourage others to do. Because if you do what you love, you never work a day in your life, and it definitely sparks energy and creativity that just seems to come naturally.
Michael Cohen is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. You're able to spark a lot of that creativity, ingenuity into Bizzy Signals Entertainment. You are a president of this company. And what does this do for you as far as being able to help the sports media community get out there in the world of sports, soccer and beyond? And what makes you sort of like a worldwide leader in the aspects of what you do from that company and beyond?
So, given the ability to, start things, if you will, from scratch in many cases, and be creative from scratch, it starts with building the right team and putting the right people in place, and be able to provide some of the encouragement that I had been provided early on in my career. Because again, if you surround yourself with the right people and let them do their job, great things are going to happen. So I think whether it's some of the Olympics I've worked on, or World Cups I've worked on, or even startups, whether it was when the National Run Soccer League went to Lifetime, and whenever you have the ability to kind of put together a team and put your handprints and fingerprints on it, the first thing I do is I always want the best people, the best people, nice people that you want to work with, and have the ability to encourage them to do their job. And then you just sit back and watch. And then, if you're lucky, you're tweaking things, and you're just you're not making major overhauls and major changes. You're letting people do their job.
With that approach, when you think about putting together a team and an event, a broadcast that you put on that you watched unfold, that you were most in awe of, considering perhaps how logistically challenging it was and all the bells and whistles that came with it, what is that one event that you've done and you've led a team in that, and again, it's probably hard to compare because there's so many high level events that you've been a part of, but the one where you just say, wow, we really pulled that off. And that took some serious manpower, some serious teamwork.
So, can I give you two?
Absolutely.
The first one, I wasn't in the person in charge, but I was in charge of a division, and that was the first X Games. It wasn't even it wasn't even called X Games the first year. It was called the Extreme Games, and that was in 1995. And that was led by two executives, Rich Feinberg and Fred Godelli. Fred Godelli is now the lead producer, of course, for Sunday Night Football and NBC. And Richie Feinberg left ESPN, was an executive there, and is now a top executive in the IndyCar world. They headed that up, and quite frankly, we were a bunch of kids, and we didn't know what the heck this was going to become. The area that I was focused on inside of that was an area that I learned while at ABC and then went to NBC, which was an area called preset. We were in charge of all the opens and the closes and the teases and the look and the sound of the field. And I had learned that while at ABC doing at the Calgary Olympics as an associate producer, and then as a producer with NBC a couple of years after that in 92 and 96. Atlanta, actually 92, Atlanta happened after. But basically, I brought that level of expertise because they wanted to make these type of sports, inline blading, right, and BMX bicycle jumping, and they wanted to make it into an Olympics. So, we didn't realize what we had, but it just grew into something which was, we just kept looking at each other as we were doing this. And I was given a terrific budget and a terrific team to kind of create something. And that was one of the big wow moments. And of course, the X Games has gone on since then. I would tell you that the one thing that and I'm proud of a lot of things, again, just been part of a great group with a great group of people. But I would say the 2002 World Cup in Korea and Japan. That was an opportunity that I had through my association with Major League Soccer, a new company they started called Soccer United Marketing, to be able to be the executive producer on those World Cup shows that have aired both on ABC and ESPN. And it was very much blank canvas. People had watched the Olympics and World Cup, excuse me, and you're at that tipping point of soccer just turning the corner. And I had done a lot of studying about the '98 World Cup, and they did a great job in France. U.S. men didn't, of course, bowing out after the first three games. But what I studied in that is that they seem to be losing people at halftime for non-U.S. matches and for non-major matches. And I figured if there's a way that I could figure out how to keep those people at halftime, and we can maybe keep those ratings going. And the other challenge we faced was we were on in the middle of the night because the matches were in Korea and Japan. So I'm very much, and I've been taught by some of the best, and my mentor in the business is Michael Weissman, who's multi-award winning Hall of Fame, Broadcasting Hall of Fame, Mike Weissman, and he's very big on talent. And Michael found such talent as Bob Costas, and he really stressed that. And so I went to talent first, and I figured, what can I do at halftime? The game is the game, and no disrespect to the game, right? We have game broadcasters, and we actually developed some really great people. But it was, what could I do at halftime? And the network and gave me the ability, carte blanche, if you will, to figure that out. And one of the first people that I met in my search was Cosmos legend, soccer legend, actually, Giorgio Canaglia. I went down to Fort Lauderdale. He agreed to meet with me. And it started out as me interviewing him Well, that lasted about 5 minutes. I would tell you the next 2 hours was he was really interviewing me.
Interesting.
And then I said, I got this guy. I got the guy. I got the guy that is opinionated and vocal and world renowned and experienced. But I needed a foil. I needed that person that can go the other way. And about a month after that, in about March of 2002, Eric Winaldo had gotten injured playing for the Charleston Battery. He had gone from MLS back to play for that team, and which was a second division team, I believe, at that point. And Eric got hurt. And I always knew Eric as a player as being outspoken and opinionated, and the voice of American soccer, right? Whereas Giorgio was the international soccer. So Eric got hurt, and I actually called him up, and I said, "Hey, Eric, how'd you go to the World Cup?" And he said, "Dude," he goes, "I'm hurt, right?" And I go, "I'm obviously not going to be on the team." And I go, "No, I'm in as a broadcaster." So I coached him up, and we got him to come to Connecticut, where I actually introduced him to, I didn't know at the time, but his legend or his idol was Giorgio Canaglia.
Oh, wow.
Wore his jersey, and so make a long story short, it was fire and ice, and we didn't know what we were going to get. We put him in the studio, and it became must-see TV in the middle of the night. And we broke all record ratings records for viewership of any type of programming in the middle of the night. And we actually held people through the half times, through the studio segments. Now it helped that the U.S. team, made a nice run as well, but and had some great victories against Portugal and Mexico. But the reality is that we felt that we had something, and we built upon it. And again, we had the opportunity to have terrific broadcasters, from Marcelo Balboa and JP Della Camera, and Rob Stone, who's now doing so great at Fox. Was involved as well. So, but I think that was one of the most enjoyable things for me to see, of being able to pull this group together, people tuning in at 4 in the morning, 6 in the morning, and just feeling this vibe out there. And you don't really know it, by the way, because you're in a control room in Korea and Japan. So you kind of don't know, but you hear about it. But then when you come back and you realize what the impact was, so that was pretty satisfying, but also both personally and professionally.
Michael Cohen is with us, television executive. I'm Bryan Fenley, an anchor at Fox Sports Radio. You talked about coaching these guys before getting on camera and before being part of the World Cup coverage. What did that look like for you from your point of view, and what you wanted out of them, what you were looking for them to accomplish before you put them in front of the camera for the world to see?
Right. So, and again, and this is what I love doing, and I've been really fortunate to be able to do that. You do have an advantage of being a producer, an executive producer, because you see the athletes on the field, and you get to meet them when you do interviews, and you sort of have a feeling about who maybe would be the next person. And I know one of the players meant this in a complimentary way, but they were in their final years, and it was almost like they saw me as like a vulture, because when I start scouting you around, it's like you're kind of at the end. And so I've had that opportunity. And so whether it's Eric Winaldo, Marcelo Balboa, Ali Wagner, who was one of the most amazing, we'll call her finds, but finds, is you look for people that are going to be very real and very true and very honest and very opinionated and very passionate. Because, if it cuts through if they're not, it just, people know if they're not authentic. And so whether it's those people, we always knew Rob Stone had such talent. He would have started out doing sideline, and we put him in the booth. And, Rob just had this great energy and enthusiasm about him. I'm so proud of him, and great, happy for him and what he's doing over there at Fox. But so you want people to be real. You want people to be authentic. You want people to, just be able to be outspoken and be honest. And I think that's the right word. Comfortable in front of the camera is critical. There have been, you've seen, without naming names because everyone's seen them, but the former athlete that retires, and because they're a big name, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. And I think the big mystery, which is not a mystery to a lot of these, shouldn't be a mystery to these athletes, is how much hard work and dedication it takes. It's like, and by the way, it's not just being on the air, it's all the things around it. Think about it. Many they had equipment managers, travel administrators that are booking your travel, getting you to the airport, telling you how to get from A to B. Now, all of a sudden, these athletes are on their own. It's like, you got to make your flight, and you better do your research. And, and just like when the match starts, if you didn't ready up that game plan, you're going to flop on the field. That's how a lot of these announcers have to learn, and some learn the hard way. Some don't make it, but those that do realize that it was the hard work and all the energy that they need to put into it to be successful.
These athletes, they're only used to being the best in what they do. And when they enter in a new world, like you said, some of them, it takes time because of all the years that they spent practicing and playing their sport. They feel like they're going to dominate. And some of them do in the television world right away, but others, it takes some time. So like you said,
Right.
you kind of have to play things out and see how it all works out. When you look at a Michael Cohen soccer broadcast in game, not looking at the pregame, the postgame, the halftime show, what constitutes a good broadcast to you where I don't want to say you're ever satisfied, but
Mhm.
you're pleased with the way things were handled?
Right. So first thing and foremost is, and sometimes people lose the sight of this, is our job is to document what's going on the field, and not to get in the way of the broadcast at all. And it's not about the sportscaster. It's not about cliche lines. It's about, again, documenting what's on the field. And if we do that well, we've done a great job, and we're strides ahead of a lot of other projects or shows that are on. So being documenting what's going on the field, and what that means is setting it up during the game. I always tell announcers, you got to continue to give people a reason of why they want to stay tuned for the next 2 hours in this broadcast. A lot of things we do is not just teeing up the game, but also I love when an analyst gives us things to look for. There's always analysts that always talk about second guessing, right? What I like to do is I learned this working all at the Olympics, is we want these analysts to first guess. What should be happening, what sub should be made, what's up we should be looking for, who should be off the team, who should be on the field, who should be off the field, what strategy should they be in a 4-3-3. And so I love that because it gives the viewer something to look for. Tony Romo does an amazing job at CBS, and he's very good at that because he makes you smarter or feel smarter. And believe me, I am all respect to what he's doing, but I am going to take you back to early years of Eric Ronaldo when maybe soccer viewership wasn't as popular. Eric was doing that in the mid to the early 2000s and late 2000s. Eric was broadcasting by telling us whose ball that head's going to go off on a corner kick in the box. And again, tribute to Eric for being like that. And you see that with Ali Wagner, Marcelo Balboa, and you see that with a lot of people. But again, they know the sport so well, and they're so comfortable in those broadcasts that they feel that they can do that. And so to me, that's another formula, is looking ahead. It's always nice to be able to, when you do a show open, to be able to tout somebody and then that person actually does well in that game. Uh,
Yes.
have the ability to, hear from the athlete. I also think that, it's so important. We run short on time often, but, if you don't get that post game interview or halftime interview, because again, we don't have the luxury, especially in soccer, for the most part, of having extensive pregame shows. And I do think it's important we have to hear the athletes because in the show, we like to humanize them. Give me a reason to care for them, right? It's the basics of doing World Cups and Olympics, or give them a reason to care. And that caring could be what their hometown is, where their college is, the stories, what they had to overcome to be there. Again, you don't often have the opportunities in soccer to have those extensive pregame shows, but you can do it in the broadcast. And if there's a great way, the best play-by-play out there right now is JP Dellacamera. And JP Dellacamera has this incredible talent of being able to get you engaged in the athletes and their stories, but not at the expense of calling the game. A lot of times, and I guess it's in very early years of soccer, and when I see it now, it really is discouraging. Hopefully, it's getting less and less and less. But in the early years of soccer coverage, they would take the guy that maybe wasn't doing a certain sport, maybe a beach volleyball or another sport, and they said, well, we need you to do soccer. And then he would come on and work with a person that played in the sport, and he would basically, the ball's out of bounds behind the goalkeeper, setting up for a goal kick. Tell us what a goal kick is. And you're sitting there, and it's like, are you kidding me? Like when you watch the Masters, which again, think about it. Maybe a lot of people do watch golf, but not a lot of people. Like you don't get 10 ratings. But when you watch the Masters, Jim Nantz isn't sitting there going, Tiger's lining up for a putt. Tell us what a putt is, please. So I made sure that we got away from that. We weren't trying to make the sport too inside. at all. But we would be more welcoming, but we wouldn't be welcoming as much with the play. We'd be welcoming with, the 32-year-old Bolivian striker takes a shot. So we would integrate the storylines, the little notes about the athletes and identification inside the game broadcast.
Yeah, because then it doesn't overlap with the actual coverage of the game, and then it doesn't distract the viewer. One of the things I did want to ask you, you talked about how the best broadcasters are the ones that have the stories of the athletes and
Right.
what they've overcome to get to where they are today. And like you said, integrating that into the broadcast without it being a distraction and taking over. Now I want to focus that on you. When you think of what you've overcome in your story, what is one thing, an obstacle that you were able to overcome that others would be inspired from based upon in the business, something that you went through that you're, certainly comfortable talking about, where it was a challenge, but you got through it and you became even better because of it?
Thank you. It's a great question. So I was really fortunate to get into the early years of ESPN, where we were a bunch of young men and women, and we were given the opportunity to try these different things and be innovative again because you had to be. In 1987, Capital Cities had owned ABC, and they bought this cable company called ESPN. An executive producer at the time of ABC and I got to know each other prior to that. And so he afforded me the opportunity to be the first person to go from ESPN up to ABC. And it was a big challenge. Probably one of the biggest challenges I've had. Take away the broadcasting part of it, but a life challenge, because ABC was then, and young people won't remember this, but again, back to three major networks, and ABC was one of the big ones, right? Wide world of sports, Monday Night Football, Monday Night Baseball. It was college football. It was the place to be. And a lot of the producers had been there quite a long time and were used to like crazy budgets and ridiculous budgets in some cases. And I became part of, like, I wouldn't call it the unofficial transition team, but I was sort of like where this was going. Okay, the ESPNization of ABC. And I wasn't really welcome. And I had to prove myself, to them every day. And because again, on one side, we were being asked to try things maybe a little bit less, okay, without throwing out exact numbers. Like a college football game at ESPN was produced for significantly less than a football game at ABC. So I was comfortable with that. But I was always challenged by the establishment, especially the existing producers and directors, as what are you doing? You're ruining it for everyone, kind of thing. And ultimately, I would tell you that was a big challenge for me to overcome. And it made me a better producer. It made me a better people person, because I had to learn how to deal up better, to be respectful to the people that were there, and at the same time being able to introduce and integrate what I knew to be right and what I had learned in my career.
So well said. Michael Cohen is with us. I'm Bryan Fenley. I have one more question for you. And when I hear you talk, I now begin to understand why soccer and broadcasting is really your life's purpose in so many ways. And so when you look at your career, what is it about the sport of soccer, about what you do in broadcasting, where you feel that resembles most your life's purpose and gives you the biggest smile?
So, so again, I guess I finally put a count on it. I think the number was I ended up working like 36 different sports.
Wow.
In the sports world. And again, remember, being at ESPN in the early years is we had to be prepared for everything. And then I caught the tail end of wide world of sports, where we did a lot of things, right? I mean, I didn't do cliff diving and I didn't do barrel racing, but we had to be prepared. Like I did swimming and diving, and so I ended up tallying it up. It was like 36 somewhat sports, but when I given the opportunity in 1989 to actually, because I had left the ABC and went on my own and started forming my company, I went back to ESPN, and they would assign me a bunch of sports as a packager and producer. And they gave me the 1989 NCAA men's and women's soccer games. And I think I've liked soccer, but at that point, I just really fell in love with soccer. On the men's, just to give you an idea, the men's NCAA final was between Virginia, led by the future national team coach, Bruce Arena, and Steve Sampson at Santa Clara, who was also the future national team coach. And you know what happened to Bruce, and amazing guy and success story, and Bill Belichick, if you will, of men's soccer. And the game went to triple overtime and between Virginia and Santa Clara. And you watching these guys in shorts in December run around in sub-zero weather. And I was like, this is just phenomenal. And I really started paying more attention to the sport. And then I get into it, and I was chosen by in 1995 to be originally for a launch of MLS in '96 to be the lead producer for ESPN and ABC's coverage, and then ultimately brought in by MLS to build the division. And it would just kind of frustrate me that we didn't get it in this country. Like, what was missing? The world's game wasn't catching on here. And I was just so intrigued, like, what could I do? And again, you ran into the small minority that would watch the game the way it was in Europe, and that's all they wanted. And they fought change. And I would never ever interfere with the game. I mean, scary. There were some conversations that happened early before MLS started, which is, hey, let's make the nets wider. It's like, I mean, literally these conversations happen.
Wow.
I remember going, no, we're going to focus on the game. We're going to do things around the game that have never been done. We're going to move more cameras lower. I was, again, fortunate. Director Doug Wren, who was the very early years and probably the first 12, 13, 14 years of MLS is we wanted to make it different. Again, not mess with it. So we lowered the cameras. We put more cameras down lower. We tried to get the main play-by-play cameras down to about 40, 50 feet, because when you watch those games in Europe, those cameras were up over 75 feet. And in those cases, you were watching 22 dots running on a field. Many announcers in Europe, there were one announcers, not even an analyst. And they were just calling ball to ball. And so, we brought in the analyst role. We brought in the sideline role. And in 96, 97, 98, everyone's like, stop cutting low and stop. And meanwhile, if you watch the World Cup coverage in France in 98, the FIFA World Cup coverage had more low cameras than they've ever had. So it's almost like you kind of wonder, were they watching us? And you're starting to see some of these European stadiums being built where they did lower the camera positions. And I went to Europe to do some surveys, and because I really wanted to see what they were doing, and there's a lot of answers to that. It's a 5-hour show. I'm right on that. But what I learned was, like, it's not that they strategically wanted the cameras that high. Is television came after, and the popularity of television came after the stadiums were built. So could you imagine, like, going into SoFi right now and saying, we're not going to have luxury suites at the 50 because we're going to put a camera position there?
Yeah.
Clearly that was never going to happen, man. But so that was, take that back then, they weren't going to displace people that have been sitting in those seats generations to say, we're going to put cameras there. So I think, help being part of the changing of the coverage of the game has been very satisfying. And the results that you're seeing with, rights deals unprecedented now for both domestic soccer, international soccer, into the multi-billions. And what people getting up at 9 a.m. to watch English Premier League, like my son. So I think it's been fun. So when you look back to where we were to where we are, it's quite satisfying to see the growth of the game.
I got to say, I got one more thing to add, because you brought up you watching the soccer with your son. What is it like when you're watching soccer with your son, having that conversation with him about the game, and like, what is coursing through your mind as you're watching the sport with your son?
So unfortunately, I have a bunch of children that my son and my daughter. I now have 3 stepchildren as well, three stepdaughters. But for my son and my daughter that grew up with soccer, they've seen the transformational changes. I would drag them to games where there would be like 2,000 people in a stadium, not really watching. So for both my son and my daughter to see the growth of the game, the popularity of the national team, both on the men and women's side, it is kind of fun. And they kind of got to know that we were in early, both me personally, professionally, and us as a family, from following soccer and getting engaged in soccer early on. So it's nice, and to see, and it's satisfying to me, that my son knows everything about the English Premier League, the same way when I grew up, I knew everything about the NFL.
Michael Cohen, what you've done in advancing the sport of soccer, advancing broadcasting as a whole, is priceless. And just to be able to have you on here to tell your story has been such a treat, and it is very inspirational. And I'm so grateful for your time. Michael Cohen, of course, you can check out his work, Bizzy Signals Entertainment, television executive, all over the place. We heard a lot of the different sports. Soccer certainly is very close to his heart. And we're so excited to have him on here and learn more about his opportunity to get into the sport and how he's been able to take it so far. I'm Bryan Fenley. Michael, thanks so much for doing this. I had an absolute pleasure getting to know you and learning about how everything has worked out and what you've done that has been so cutting edge in broadcasting and certainly in the sport of soccer.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for the opportunity and great to meet you. And good luck with your show. I enjoy it.